welcome to Happy Times and Places, a game attempt in a universe of complaining and mudslinging and pessimism to try to be positive, in this case, about Doctor Who. A friend of mine, I'm Toby Haydock, chooses a story, we watch along and choose our favourite things about each episode and hope that they match.
Hello there, I'm Siobhan Gallichan and I've chosen The Three Doctors.
Well, oh my giddy aunt, you're watching Doctor Who with a dandy and a clown. And that's just me. I mean, I have been one or the other and occasionally both at the same time. And now I'm confined to watching Doctor Who, but not being allowed to take part. I'm all three doctors from the Three Doctors, in one form or another. I am joined, as you heard, by Siobhan Gallichan, long-term fan, legend of fandom, William Hartnell, voice impersonator, podcaster extraordinaire, and all-round splendid person. So, I'm grateful to Siobhan, who's also... This is the second attempt she has made to do this. I'm tempted to listen to the first because she's gone, I got it wrong, because she actually very kindly recorded before this podcast was on its legs, and has obviously been listening. Siobhan is a patron. Thank you, Siobhan. And just sent me thinking, could I do it again? I was like, I'm actually due to do the Three Doctors very soon, but yeah, sure. So her contribution is hot off the press, but in a folder with the old contributions. So I wonder if she chose the same things. No, maybe not. Maybe that was... I don't know if it was just the way that she approached it in the phraseology or whether... Yeah, well, I don't know. I'm curious. Anyway, let us go to a place where anything is possible, including being in a quarry, as we go to this story that I loved when I saw it as a 6, 7, 8-year-old, and then really went off in my grotty teenage and adult life, and then in recent years learned to stop worrying and love, and then got some personal connections with as well. So it just goes to show why we revisit these stories, and there's there are new ways to enjoy. And who knows, in 20 years' time I might go off it again. But I can assure you, I suspect I'll still be watching it. I have it on DVD. I have it on Blu-ray. I also have it on a much more convenient for these purposes BritBox. Other streaming services are available, but none of them have Doctor Who on. And I'm going to watch from the beginning. And I'm going to press my button in 3, 2, 1. Yes, I'm used to always having this one in pretty reasonable quality, but yes, my mum's work colleague, Sheila, bless her, she'd got used up all her blank tapes to just keep pressing record on the B-Sky B Doctor Who weekend. And then I copied all these over to other tapes to sort of cut out the adverts and stuff like that. And I put all the interview material and stuff that was between episodes on the end of discs or elsewhere. Not discs, tapes. There were no discs in those days. And I remember going into school and talking to my friend Ollie, about that episode ending. You know, it was something that really struck. And here we have something that is going to be hard pressed. So, spoiler alert, early on, here we find Patrick Troughton as the second Doctor and John Levene as Sergeant Benton, who I think are the most inspired pairing of all. I think John Levene is a better actor when he's directed by Douglas Camfield. Camfield brings something slightly more real out of John, and I think John is perhaps a bit more confident because Douglas Camfield made him feel confident. And anyone who's seen John at a convention will know John is not unconfident, but he has the confidence of, I think, a man with no confidence. Whereas I think the confidence Douglas Camfield gave him is one that enabled him to relax a bit and not overcompensate. However, I think here, I don't know if it's Lenny Mayne, the director. I'm not sure it is. I think it's more Patrick Troughton, who is very much an actor's actor. And if an actor of Troughton's calibre is treating you with respect, that makes you raise your game. And I think it also channels one of John Levine's greatest assets as Benton, which is this sort of slightly pained Labrador vibe that he's got going on. And the fact that sort of Troughton is slightly patronising as the Doctor, he and that's sort of part of the fun, is he's slightly patronising to people that are bigger and tougher than him. Now, here we have sort of, perhaps the biggest foray that the Brigadier has made into comic stooge, which sort of Troughton's antics sort of encourage a bit. But Nick Courtney's going that way as well, because he was sort of closer to this than he was to the sort of the slightly harder, tougher Brig of the earlier seasons. And I guess if you play a character for a long time, I suspect you get closer to yourself. And Nick Courtney was an actor, but he wasn't a character actor. He wasn't he wasn't a sort of chameleon like actor in the same way that many of our character actors are. He was a character actor of types, and that's not to disparage him. Such people do amazing work and are very reliable in the things that they do, and still probably got to show more versatility in his career than an actor today often gets to. Certainly a jobbing actor, and I love Nicholas Courtney, but I am acknowledging that I can see why people don't like this aspect of the Brigadier, who's hitherto been a very large, quite a serious character, a solid presence beside the dandified Doctor and the ridiculous antics. But this guy has seen it all. But I think the Chroma joke is great, but it makes no sense seeing me and me and me. I remember that delighting me as a child, and all of that I am he and he is me. But I remember at school again saying to my friend Ollie, love that me and me and me. I thought that was hilarious. Clyde Pollitt is wearing a wig as the Chancellor, and you can see, because the last time he was on Gallifrey, which is his third Time Lord, who curiously appears first in the War Games, he's got less hair than that. He's also got a very sort of reedy, slightly sort of falsetto voice. He's got that quite fluting voice. Slightly raspy, fruiting voice. I quite like these performances, but they are quite hammy. Roy Purcell as the President is doing what is required. He's delivering the dramatic dialogue whilst holding blue and red bits of round paper. They're round, presumably, because you could put them up in your TARDIS with instructions. I don't know. But Roy Purcell, who I think that's also a wig, isn't it? Those we are pledged to protect. They have very, very hammy dialogue as well. This is written very much as space people chatting space stuff to each other. You can't imagine any of these lot nipping out for a fag, or having lunch. But and you get actors like Roy Purcell as the President, who are doing what you would do in a sort of Shakespeare play, playing, Maecenas or the Duke of Exeter or somebody, sort of standing there and giving it all your classical heft. And then when it gets dramatic, or you get to the end of the scene, giving it a bit of serious welly. I love. And Clyde Pollitt, as the Chancellor, who's only in these first two episodes, so I have to talk about him, is the brother of Driver Evans-C, Derek Pollitt, who also pops up in Doctor Who and the Silurians, doesn't he? In a tiny part. And there was a third Pollitt, Keith, who I think wasn't an actor, but he certainly wrote an a little obit of Derek in the Guardian. So yeah, and Clyde Pollitt did loads of work with the English Shakespeare Company with Michael Bogdanov when they were putting on sort of Henry V with people wearing Union Jack underpants, and it was all modern dress, and it was all actually against the kind of classical posturing of the kind of performances we see on Gallifrey. So he was actually part of quite a modern wave of Shakespeare performance, but died quite some time ago before the likes of me were writing to people. But he did have a late flourish to his career in an important corner of British theatre. People like John Woodvine and Gareth Thomas, and people like that were doing that sort of work as well. Working with Bogdanov at the English Shakespeare Company. I quite like the Gel Guards when they do that. When they sort of walk slowly. I mean, the movement's not great. This is why we have movement choreographers these days, rather than Ricky Newby, who's a children's entertainer. Ricky Newby, who still occasionally sends me emails. He's still going strong. He was a Dalek and a Gel Guard. Ricky Newby sort of shuffling along. But I actually like the design. The one-eyed thing is good. The jelly, it's like a psychotic lump of jelly, and with a claw that shoots explosions. What's not to love? And I think they look quite good in the quarry as well. It's just when you have that sort of materialization in the first episode and the which I think is one of the funniest bits in all, unintentionally funny bits of Doctor Who. Holy Moses, what's that? Why didn't I choose that as my favourite thing? Because it embarrasses me to the core, but I'm finding it quite cheery today. I love... fill it with useless information. Television set. I wonder if that was a Troughton ad-lib. I don't know. Because there is the story, isn't there, of Troughton throwing in lines slightly differently or from left field, and Pertwee not coping, because lest we forget, it's not said often enough, actually, Pertwee had done very little dramatic acting in a television studio, if any at all, very little, before he played Doctor Who. And was always a bit self-conscious as an actor. He was a man of voices. He was an actor as a performer, but not a dramatic actor, and sort of hid behind the technique, of knowing your lines. Whereas Troughton was a bit more, organic and free-flowing. But Troughton, when he realised that Pertwee wasn't happy with him coming out from a different side or saying a slightly different line, was smart and professional enough to go, okay, we'll do it your way, and the two got on famously, because Pertwee, I think, could be quite testy and had to be managed, and Troughton was smart enough to know how to manage him. I love all of that. I've talked over that. I love the image of a pair of doors in a quarry. I love even more the idea that it's a pair of doors in this, created imaginary wilderness, as something as prosaic as a pair of doors in this place that's created and held together by the will of Omega, as it turns out, which if you had a multi-million-pound budget, I don't think you'd make it a quarry. Lenny Mayne is aided by the sun, which I think is making the location footage look rather lovely, and by the fact that he's decided to film it all at an angle to give it a kind of slightly skew-if aspect, which suggests, we're playing with reality and nothing's actually quite straight here. That's, when you're shooting in a quarry, trying to suggest something Doctor Who-y, and I love that. The incongruity of the game warden guy with his double-barrel shotgun and slightly quizzical expression popping up from behind a mound, as he does for the rest of the episode. And we love Laurie Webb. We love him. These two obviously get on, which I think is beautiful. I mean, I again, anybody that sort of takes Benton under their wing is nice. And yet, he's handy with a machine gun. He's convincing as a soldier. You know that if it gets down and dirty, Benton will lay down his life. It's a bit like in the episodes of Dad's Army when, they occasionally remind you that these guys, for all their hilarious antics, would lay down their lives and be very brave and blunt and about the sacrifice that they are about to make in a way that would make a lot of people of my generation, and certainly the ones before underneath, quake in their boots. And that kind of simple, uncomplicated, well, yeah, I would do that kind of bravery. That nonetheless is not sentimentalized, because it's not a sentimental thing, and is actually played with winning comedy here by look at Benton's sort of wounded sort of fear. I love this, and I think it's the perfect. John is not the world's greatest actor, but he does what he does very well, and the things he does particularly well are this sort of thing, and I think this is the perfect story for Benton. And I'm not saying, hear anything I wouldn't say to John. I saw John quite recently. I speak to him on the phone relatively regularly, and he's a complicated fellow, and his heart is in the right place, and his mouth sometimes doesn't know how to articulate that. I love the fact that sort of Benton's, it's got slightly out of control. He did what he was told, and Courtney knows to be looking outside, so that then when he comes here, and so of course that's the shot of him in Mordred Undead, isn't it? That's the bit that they use for the flashback. So of course this is a landmark moment. It's the Brigadier in the TARDIS for the first time. And I can see what Siobhan means about the TARDIS interior. And actually, the guys in military fatigues within the TARDIS interior is rather nice. It's a nice. I talk a lot about juxtaposition in Doctor Who, the juxtaposition of the ordinary with the extraordinary, or the mundane with the spectacular. Rex is very good, I think, as Dr. Tyler, especially when you consider it's the same guy who plays Gebek in Monster of Peladon, and also Dr. Carter in Hand of Fear. But they're the real contrasts, because you'd have probably gone for they never really went for huge names in the Pertwee era. It was very much, your lead guest stars were sort of doughty character actors rather than, serious leads, often most of the time, which is why they can afford Land Rovers and things, I guess. But I was looking up a Z-Cars episode? I think I was looking for early appearances of Wendy Padbury earlier today for something somebody had asked me, and I looked up this episode of Z-Cars, and it had got Rex Robinson in. It had got David Purcell, who's in The Hand of Fear, who, as I pointed out last episode, is Roy Purcell's son. And I think somebody, and I went, I bet this is directed by Lenny Mayne. And lo and behold, it was directed by Lenny Mayne. Now, you see, that looks to me, that angle makes it look like it's got the edge of the television screen. Now, maybe it's not. Maybe that's supposed to be, it's the sort of indentation and it's a sort of recess and the screen is set back. But it looks to me from that angle like it's a television set that they've not built the set round properly. And it's just that, I love that though. I love that. That's just a very sort of economical bit of, right, they can't run away. Lovely bit of Laurie Red behind a mound. And it makes and the gel guards are actually shot very nicely on location with their claws just coming to view, or bits of them. I think the filming work in the quarry is very nicely done, and I love those 70s explosions. Well, those Pertwee era explosions that are very, sort of orange and smoky and big, and they look really good, because when you get to the 80s, the explosions all get a bit glittery and a bit fireworky, whereas they're real proper smoky explosions in the Pertwee era. Much more of a fan of 70s explosions than 80s explosions, so hang me. Now the video that Sheila did for me ran out at kind of this point, I think, in the episode, And it starts again when Troughton bangs the Brigadier's radio. I remember that. That's just me taking myself down memory lane for the bits I had missing of episode 2 of the Three Doctors. Now, yeah, I mean, I think this is the big failing of the story, and it's the design. Roger Lymington, who I think was long gone before anybody got a chance to speak to him. I mean, his design, I think, works brilliantly in Carnival of Monsters. This kind of kitschy 70s vibe that, sort of works for the inside of the Miniscope, which is run by kitschy 70s people. Vaughan Schirner, and it is slightly comic strippy with its three sets of with its sets of characters. It's got Vaughan Schirner and the Miniscope, and they've got the three grey bureaucrats and the three people on the boat, and it's like, and they're all sort of types, and it's all quite zingy and fun and comic strippy. I love that. I think that is typical Troughton. Opening the radio and all the bits falling out. I adore that, and he does it with that kind of optimism that immediately turns to, oh no, I've buggered this up, that then turns to, oh, but I'm sure I'll make it work if I have a bash. And I love all of those things, and I love the combination of them. I love the story of that. That to me is sort of what Doctor Who does. So if Doctor Who is a genius, Doctor Who is also a genius who doesn't necessarily have the best methodology, but has a go anyway. Often makes mistakes, but somehow manages to bodge his or her way to success. And I love that. I can identify with that more than I can identify with, I'm the greatest electrician in the world, or I'm so righteous, my righteousness will win through in the end. I much prefer a hero, which is why I like the Doctor, who is kind of flawed but in a charming way, because I hope that even when because we all muck things up, I hope that and we all do bad things as well. We're all prone to making mistakes, but I hope that if I ever do that, it's with the best intentions, and because I'm a bit crap at things, but I have a go, and I do my best. Now, I remember when we were doing Running Through Corridors, Rob getting very annoyed with this episode, because Dr. Tyler is basically, having been quite fun with his E=mc², is now a bit of a pain in the arse, and basically runs off only to get captured again. And that's and that's kind of true. It does. They are sort of killing time before getting to the reveal of who the bad guys. And now Dr. Tyler's basically, isn't he? He's just going to go and run back to the Doctor. Now I can see what the design's aiming for there, actually, because you've got the doors that, if the gel guards stand in, well, these partitions in the corridors that are made of sort of gel guard material. When that one was following Dr. Tyler, or when it stood in that sort of entranceway, it was like it sort of merged with the scenery. So I can see the ambition behind that, and it's kind of saying they're all made of the same stuff. So what, Omega has sort of created this world from his imagination, and so why wouldn't you make your guards out of the same as just pluck a few bits out of, and it is quite godlike, isn't it? I make eat out of the rib of Adam and all of that sort of thing. Yes, bang it and make it work. There we go. That's exactly the thing to do. I love that as well, that Doctor Who is the sort of person who bangs things to make them work. But yes, that I did, because as we learn, Omega is a god in his domain. A hero, I should have been a god, is a wonderful line. He's created this world, and so the idea that the walls are made of the same thing as the gel guards are made kind of works, but they look like obvious sort of bits of scenery flat cut out, and they're just they're a good idea, but they're they're rendered, I would say, as poorly as any set in the Pertwee era. That's a decent shot of Hartnell. It's crying out to get a shot of him that's not on the telly. Or I wish these film elements still existed, so that at least we had the full face of Hartnell. And I'd love it if we had a few of the outtakes and all of that. I'm afraid you'd never believe it. About the Troughton guess, I'm not even going to bother. I do like that dynamic, and that dynamic of Brigadier works again particularly well with Troughton, because Troughton has that that slightly patronising air. Although I was listening to a lovely podcast called Hamster with a Blunt Penknife, presented by gorgeous Joey, who's a lovely podcast host, and I was listening to him and Cy Hart, who I also haven't met, talking about but their names to conjure. The Macroterra, and they were, discussing Troughton, and Cy used a word I've never used, and it's very difficult when you're doing these things to try and find new things to say about performers and characters, especially ones that are in a number of stories, like all of your Doctors. But he described Troughton as elusive. Cy Hart did, I think. And I thought that was a wonderful world, because we have Mercurial, we have Pixie. I've used Caper a lot, which I quite like. But yeah, it's that mysteriousness that he has. That although he's engaging, although he's funny, although he's got that sort of whirring intelligence, there is, when he's sort of inside his head and weighing up the consequences, there is an elusiveness to him, or elusive, as they would say in those. It quite works when things disappear in this story or appear. You get a nice close-up for Corporal Palmer. That's all right. That's quite well done, though. Which you get repeated on the original DVD. For some reason, that cliffhanger sort of exists in a glitch in it, and it happens twice. It's actually not as bad as you think. Nice close-up for Corporal Palmer at the end of the episode, and that's the last we see of him. Well, we see him next episode, but he's... that's it for him. Dennis Palmer, he was a dancer, friend of Rex Robinson, long dead now, sadly. So we've had a little bit. And Clyde Pollitt we don't get any more of as well. I think Clyde Pollitt is better in the War Games than he is in that. As I say, I find Gallifrey a bit hammy. It's not even Gallifrey. The control room of Gallifrey a bit hammy in the Three Doctors, but I actually don't mind that, because of it needs to represent the sort of the important alien space people doing the important alien space stuff that sort of tells us how and represent how important bringing these Three Doctors together is, because they have quite a comic relationship and that banter is very nice. It would just seem like a laugh and a bit of a romp were there not, the lofty alien overlord guys, sort of hammily decrying how terribly important all of this stuff is. And, it is a convention. It is quite a dated setup and performance style and writing, all of that, but it kind of fits, and it's a sort of necessary change in tone, with all the the comic banter between Pertwee and Troughton, and indeed the particularly the comic banter between Troughton and the unit guys, which all, if we're not careful, gets it. Although Troughton is very good with his steely eyes and that quick intelligence and that furrowed brow, that even when he's being funny, he's suggesting that that's a front for the great danger that they're facing. Troughton never really sends it up. Although I have to say, the Three Doctors is not my favourite performance of his. I think it takes him a while to get to settle into the role. Although I've no idea what order it was shot in, but I think those early TARDIS scenes, I think he goes in a bit too high. I mean, he's such a good actor, it doesn't matter. But I'm comparing to when he's really on song. He's he and Tom Baker are my joint favourite Doctors. So this is me being very pernickety, but it's because I have to speak for every minute of entire episode runs. So I'm going to say everything, even though the episode's now stopped. So I could actually shut up. Why don't I? Well, because I have to now. You see, I mean, there's more of them next episode. What I really like, you see, is the bit where they sort of got their hands up, because that's on the back of the Target book, and that's in episode 3 of Benton and Troughton captured by the Gel Guards, and just that image of them with their hands up, I absolutely love. But it starts really in this episode. Once Pertwee and Joe get captured, it's Benton and the Second Doctor in the TARDIS. And I know the Brigadier comes in a little bit later, but because of what continues into next week, because the Brigadier goes off and does his chroma joke, for me, the Troughton-Benton pairing is one of my... I think it's probably my favourite thing about the whole story. It's one of my favourite things. It's two of my favourite Doctor Who characters. One who has, I think, no limitations. Troughton, I think, is such a good actor, so good at the serious stuff, so good at the balance. But that character that he comes up with to play the Doctor, I think, is such a genius creation, and he's such a good actor. And then you've got John Levine, who's not the world's greatest actor, but does what he does well, and actually excels when he's given certain responsibilities or is written in a certain way. He really rises to the occasion, and it's the fact that he's got those limitations that actually makes that rising to the situation more heroic, and actually then feeds into how you respond to Sergeant Benton, because he is, quite a straightforward guy who's not the smartest, who's doing his best, and also is a wonderful foil, both John Levine and Sergeant Benton, and I think he works particularly well with Troughton. So it's the Benton, Troughton, I've mixed my actors and my characters there, combo is my choice of favourite thing for episode 2. And indeed, I mean, it's one of my favourite Doctor Who things. Siobhan, what are you going to choose for episode 2? I should say what I reject. I nearly would have had just the explosion, the explodey bit, with the Gel Guards around the Dr. Joe and Dr. Tyler. Love that. Simple, effective, exciting, great when you're a kid. I love Troughton smashing the Brigadier's radio. That's adorable. I love Mr. Hollis popping his head up from behind mounds. I like the way Lenny Mayne has shot the Netherworld in angles. I love the double doors. Oh, do I save Troughton and Benton for next week? Actually, well, no, because something else might come up. Because I love that image of the doors and Bessie and the bits of the lab, in contrast to the desolate alien Netherworld. Having something as contemporary and mundane as a pair of doors stuck, in a faraway alien landscape, I think is so adorably Doctor Who. And even though it's compromised by the fact that it's a quarry, when I was a kid watching that, it's an alien planet. It's not supposed to be an alien planet. It's supposed to be this amazing world conjured by Omega, who's obviously got a slightly limited imagination. I think we shall make it stones, but a hero. I should have been a quarryman. I do like the door on the alien planes, but no, I love that image. I do. I adore it. I adore it, the conception of it. Let's put some doors in an alien. That's Doctor Who. Isn't that Doctor Who? Just a pair of doors in an alien landscape. Yeah. I have to explain Doctor Who to anybody now. It's just a pair of doors on an alien landscape. Benton and the Second Doctor.
Episode 2 or part 2 or however you want it. It's Patrick Troughton. Quite simply. I mean, yes, we are getting a slight caricature of the Second Doctor here, but this isn't Pat's show. You know, he's just turned up as a guest, and he's giving his party turn, if you like. And it's just beautiful. We get all the best bits of the Second Doctor in one package. There's great stuff there. His interaction with Nick Courtney, especially in this episode, is just hilarious. Especially, and kudos to Nick Courtney for this, but the look he gives Troughton when the Brigadier first realises who he's talking to, and the oh no. Oh, but Troughton is just a joy, you know, slamming a walkie-talkie microphone on the console. Now try it. And we got to say Troughton. We've got to. Yeah.
Now, I mean, do I get half a point for that? Half a point for that? Maybe. It's up to you. And that's an interesting observation about saying, yes, I'm glad I'm not the only one who thinks that occasionally Troughton is like a sort of caricature of his previous performance, but I get that observation that, you know, he's an interloper into the series as it is now, rather than the lead in his own series, and also it's been a while since it's only a couple of years since he played the part, but that dynamic is necessarily different. So okay, I'll buy that. So I think I get half a point for that. I get a point that is stuck in a time eddy and watching from afar as the other part recedes into the distance, something like that. Anyway, I enjoyed that, and again, I remembered that episode ending from when I saw it the first time. I remember, you know, the disappearance of Unit HQ, and I remember my brothers talking about that, saying, yeah, because that was important. Whereas I think, you know, this is actually the first unit story I ever saw. And it just seemed so right, you know, soldiers in the grounds of, you know, their headquarters, submachine gunning, you know, alien jelly beasts. That to me seemed like the Doctor Who of yore that I imagined Doctor Who to be like when I was a kid growing up on a diet of, you know, season 17 and 18. And yes, when I watched this, season 18 had just happened. It was the gap between seasons 18 and 19. And as I say, I love season 18 now, but it seemed to me to be sort of quite elegiac, prosaic Burgundy maths, but Velvet Burgundy maths talking, and I was much more. I had a much bigger appetite for soldiers with submachine guns shooting at jelly beasts in a car park. So, and doors on alien landscapes, because we know those doors, as uninteresting as they are, well, it's the very fact that they're uninteresting that just throws up all the possibilities of what could be on the other side of them. And on the other side of this will be episode 3, which will be next time. But until then, that's it from me and me and me. Well, thank you ever so much for listening to Happy Times and Places, which is presented by me, Toby Haydock. My special guest watching the Three Doctors is Siobhan Gallichan, who can be found on Twitter at SIO Gallichan. And I'm grateful to Siobhan and, of course, to the patrons who make these podcasts possible. And they include Jeff Sear, who hasn't been on the credits in ages because he dropped off the list. So I'm going to say his name a lot. Jeff Sear. I'm sorry, Jeff, you weren't here. But now Jeff's here. Jeff Sear. I'm sorry, Jeff. There you go. Jeff Sear. I will be saying Jeff's name a number of times over the next few episodes. Stephen Moffat, Peter Burns, Peter Harness, Philip Marsh, PDT, Tom Hunter Watts, Ian Dean, Chris Bone, Paul Loveday, Damien Cartin, Fleet Boy and Matt Sawyer. The music is by Dave Gates, the artwork by Dylan Patterson. And I really am grateful to those of you who continue to be patrons as the world falls apart and interest rates rocket and everything gets more expensive. Now, this tries to be as inexpensive as possible. Well, it's free, but if you do find yourself in a position to support the arts, if that's indeed what this is, to support independent content providers, I think that's what we're called now. Oh my goodness, that sounds awful. Do I want to be one of those? Well, anyway, look, I have a Patreon. I am cap in hand, and as I say, yes, this stuff goes out for free. Of course it does, and it goes out without advertising. I do not take adverts. I'm not going to sit there pretending I like those beds or that shaving kit or that food delivery service that I don't use but have to pretend to. I go, and actually I started using them and really liked it. What a coincidence. Just listen to the news agents, actually, which is Emily Maitlis and John Sobel. You know, these are proper journalists going, yes, and the when you fly Virgin, you'll find that they think the customers are like their family. And you go, I know you've just been made to say that. I know this is the advert bit because you have to make us know that it's the advert bit. So you're sort of pretending that we don't know, that we know, that you know, that you know, that we know, that this is just a lie because for 30 pieces of silver. I mean, you know, I'm sure if Virgin Atlantic were paying top dollar for this, I might consider it, but it's never going to happen. So I find myself in a very easy position to go, yes, I refuse all adverts. I don't think anybody wants to advertise. Anyway, there is an option, I think, on the internet provider, the podcast provider that I use, but I am not going to. Instead, I rely on you. So there's no obligation, but if you do, if that really, that anti-plug that I've just done has in any way melted your heart, you could go to patreon.com/Toby Haydock, and for as little as £3 a month, there are higher tiers, and there are things to lure you up the higher tiers, but most things are available at the base £3 per month, and you get 10% off that and off every other tier if you commit to a year in one go. And for that, you get advanced releases, you get bonus material, you get exclusives, you get monthly AMAs, and you get pictures of my dog. You can also go to kofi.com/Toby Haydock, which doesn't give you any of the advantages, but it also doesn't tie you in to any form of commitment at all. And it just means if you've had a good day or you've had a bonus or you listened to an episode that you particularly liked, you could buy me a coffee. Isn't that a lovely metaphor? And it goes up in denominations of £3, and you can buy me as many coffees or as few as you like. It's still me essentially begging for favours, but this one is at least pretending to be a drink. But what costs nothing, and seriously, things are getting really tough out there. I know that. And it actually means something to me if, over the next year or so, when we're all a bit skint and everything's a bit rubbish. I mean, this podcast was bred of COVID and lockdown, and it was an attempt to go, well, I'll try and do something where at least I feel like I'm connecting with people and maybe doing something useful, even in the only way that I can do things, which is saying things out loud, which isn't that much use. But look, if that's what this is over the next year, just a way of being in contact with people, even though we can't actually literally interact, then I think that's something, isn't it? I think that's something. So I'm just glad that you're listening. And if you're having a shitty day, and something related to Doctor Who, even if it's just me blathering on about it, has brightened your shitty day, then I haven't wasted my time. And more importantly, you haven't wasted yours. Spending some of your precious time in it's not even the company, is it? Because you don't get to say anything back to me. But look, anyway, I'm grateful that you listen and that you're there, and I hope you and yours are doing okay. And it'll be all right. We have to keep fighting against the bad things, but we have to do it with a smile on our face and with inventiveness and with a sense of humour, because otherwise that's when we lose. And so gosh, that all got a bit philosophical at the end of the bit where I essentially ask you for money. But you know what, it's just the nature of things. I have to stop apologising. It's just the way things are these days with content and putting stuff out there. And the beauty is, if you don't want to, you don't have to. And I still like you. Well, that went places I wasn't expecting it to, and I'm not sure I want it to have gone, but there we go. It's the post-credits bit. I have to have a rule where I don't start editing or changing that, because otherwise I'm paying far too much time and attention on a bit that shouldn't really exist anyway. This is all pointless. This exists in a nowhere world. However, I will use all the forces of my creation to scrawl on the quarry walls. What costs you nothing is to go to iTunes, Podbean, Spotify, wherever you receive your podcasts, and to leave a 5-star review and perhaps a few lines saying nice things about these podcasts. Both really help. Well, it all got a little bit St. Crispin's Day, didn't it? But about the fact that we're all going to be really poor. But we'll be all right. I know it's going to be tough. But we're still in the 21st century. Generally in the countries where everyone listens to this, we could have been born in worse times and places. So although they're not as happy as perhaps we'd like them to be, we can get through this. With me, it probably means I'll just, because travelling around as a stand-up now is getting impossible. I mean, the price, and I don't drive. The price of getting to gigs now costs more than you earn from them. So I'll probably be staying at home, making more things with the microphone that I bought during COVID, and doing this kind of thing, which as I say, I enjoy. And if you're listening to what this must be about, it's episode 62.2 of, but that means nothing, because of course it doesn't mean it's episode 62, because episode 43 had 4 or 6 parts to it. So my numbering system, I've got no idea how many episodes of this I've done, but it must be over 300. It must be around that. So if you're still listening at this point, well, my goodness me, good for you. So I. You hopefully won't be too disappointed that I might be making more of these things. Anyway, I've been writing a script, which is why I'm doing more of these commentaries than of the Too Much Information's Indefinable Magics, 2 of which I have half written. But my writing time really has to, because I've got this script that I really have to finish. It's a spec script, but nobody's ever going to read it. But it's something to give my agent. I'm working on it with a script editor. It's all, it's part of my proper job. This isn't my proper job, he says, having just said, but it's worth paying for. But yeah, this is a hobby that went wrong. that was bred on the swings of Moore Park School, where I played on the swings with my friend Ollie when we were 6 or 7, and I was so excited that the Three Doctors was on the telly. And I'm still pretty excited that it's still on the telly now, and it's on the telly because I choose it to be, rather than on the telly because there was of the miracle of a repeat of something old. Oh, Oh, such a thing. And I've just watched the Billy plays on BBC Four, because they resurrected those for their play for today's, that were the big break of Kenneth Branagh. And they're directed by the Graffinder K, Paul Seed, and they star Peter Walmsley as well from Battlefield, Jimmy Ellis, who was in the first ever acting company I ever worked with professionally, and was a lovely man. And watching these plays from the early 80s, where people don't behave as if they're in a drama, they actually behave as if they're real people, where events don't unfold because they thematically should, or that metaphor is completed there. It's almost like they're sort of slices of life, where nothing is explained or apologized for. You as the viewer have to go, God, the men here are a bit sort of bloody thoughtless and antagonistic, and then you go, and everyone's taking it in their stride, and that's the commentary. It's not that then somebody sits down and goes, aren't men antagonistic and fighty and boozy and bullyish, and yet solid and dependable and occasionally strangely moralistic in a weird way. It's all sort of there, and you have to do that. And very refreshing and interesting. But I wonder how many of today's audience would stand for it, because it doesn't steer you. It tells its story through character and through brilliant performances. But again, performances that are perhaps slightly off key for people used to today's styles of acting, which are no more real. They're just real in a different way. But that's a whole other thing. I've added about 20 minutes to the end of this. This is not a prologue. This is like a whole other episode. It used to be a couple of quips, didn't it? And now it's a monologue, which I must now bring to an end. So I'm going to fade back into the distance with plinky plonky music, having said stuff I clearly don't understand because I'm reading it off a cue card. That's my excuse.